Have you ever just stopped and wondered what's really going on inside your head when you're trying to solve a problem? Well, in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers on your mind's incredible problem-solving machine. And trust me, some of the answers might surprise you. So let's start with a little thought experiment. From the moments you wake up to the second you fall asleep, how many conscious choices do you think you make? Go on, take a guess. A few dozen? Maybe 100, tops? Believe it or not, the answer is in the thousands. Seriously, from what to wear, to what to eat for lunch, to navigating those really complex challenges at work, your brain is just a non-stop problem-solving machine. And the craziest part? Most of this happens automatically, thanks to a pretty amazing set of cognitive tools we're about to unpack. So here's what we've got on tap. First, we're going to look at how our brain sorts the massive amount of information in the world. Then we'll dive into the thinker's toolkit it uses and some of the mental shortcuts and traps that come along with it. After that, we'll explore the art of actually making a choice. And finally, we'll see how we can unlock an even better, more creative brain. Okay, so how on earth does the brain handle thousands of decisions a day without completely short-circuiting? Well, it all starts with creating order from chaos. See, before we can even begin to solve a problem, our brain has to make sense of the world around us. And it does this through a really powerful process called categorization. Categorization is basically your brain's internal filing system. Instead of having to analyze every single new thing from scratch, it just sorts similar things into groups. A chair is a chair, right? Doesn't matter if it's a fancy office chair or a kitchen stool. This simple act of sorting makes the world so much less complicated. And this system, it is incredibly powerful. By organizing all this information into neat little categories, our brain frees up a ton of mental energy. This makes everything better, from our memory to our ability to tackle new problems. It just makes our thinking faster and way more efficient. So how does our brain actually do all this sorting? Well, psychologists have a couple of main theories on this. The prototype theory says we create a mental best example for every category. You know, when you think bird, you probably picture something like a robin. But the exemplar theory suggests something different, that we store every single example we've ever seen and just compare new things to that huge mental library. And here's a perfect example of that prototype effect in action. For most people, a golden retriever fits our mental prototype of a dog way better than, say, a chihuahua does. Because of that, our brain can actually identify it as a dog just a tiny bit faster. Pretty cool, right? Okay. So our world is all neatly sorted into these mental file folders. What's next? Well, now our brain can pull from a special toolkit of strategies to tackle pretty much any problem that comes its way. Let's take a look at what's inside. We've really got two main types of tools here. On one side, you have algorithms. These are the slow, careful, step-by-step instructions, like a recipe or a math formula, that will absolutely guarantee you get the right answer. But on the other side, you've got heuristics. These are the fast and dirty mental shortcuts, those rules of thumb that are usually good enough, but don't promise the perfect result every time. Let's look at a few of these heuristics we use all the time. There's means-ends analysis, which is just breaking a huge problem down into smaller, bite-sized goals. Think about planning a big vacation. Then there's working backward. If you lose your keys, you probably try to retrace your steps from where you are, right? And of course, there's analogy, where your brain just goes, hey, this new problem feels a lot like that old one I already solved. But here's the catch. These mental shortcuts, these heuristics, they're not perfect. They can actually lead us down the wrong path sometimes, creating these predictable little errors in our thinking. Let's dig into the hidden biases or mind traps that can mess with our decisions. The best way to think about cognitive biases is like glitches in our mental software. And they aren't random mistakes either. They're systematic, predictable patterns that make us act illogically, often without us even having a clue it's happening. For example, ever heard of anchoring bias? That's why the first price you see when you're car shopping has such a huge impact on what you're willing to pay later. Or confirmation bias, which is our tendency to only listen to news that, confirms what we already believe. And then there's the availability heuristic, which is why we're more afraid of a super rare shark attack than, say, a much more common car accident. And we owe a huge chunk of what we know about all this to the groundbreaking work of two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. These guys were the pioneers who first identified and studied all these little glitches in our thinking, and their work completely changed how we understand economics and psychology. Okay, so you've got all these complex processes, these mental shortcuts, these potential biases all swirling around in your head. So how do we actually land on a final decision? How do we make the call? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is something called the framing effect. This basically shows that the way information is presented to us, how it's framed, can totally change our choice, even if the options we're looking at are exactly the same. Here's the classic example. Would you rather buy ground beef that's labeled 80% lean or 20% fat? I mean, 80% lean just sounds way healthier, right? But here's the thing. It's the exact same product. The only thing that changed was the frame, and that completely changed our choice. All right, for the final leg of our journey, we're going to move beyond just logic and methodical problem solving. We're going to explore the almost magical elements of our thinking, insight and creativity. You know that feeling, right? The aha moment? You've been wrestling with a problem for hours, maybe even days, and then suddenly, bam, the solution just pops into your head out of nowhere. Psychologists call that insight, and it usually happens when we stop trying so hard and just let our subconscious mind do the heavy lifting. And what's really cool is that this aha moment isn't just some random flash of brilliance. It's actually part of a process. It starts with preparation, where you just soak up all the information you can. Then comes incubation, where you step away and do something else entirely. That leads to illumination, your aha moment, and finally verification, where you actually test out your new idea. And this all shows us something really important. We tend to think of creativity and logic as total opposites, but they're not. They're really two sides of the same coin. You can't have true innovation without both. You need that creative spark to come up with new ideas, and you need critical thinking to figure out if they're any good and how to make them work. So we'll leave you with this final thought. By understanding the architecture of your own thinking, the categories, the shortcuts, the biases, you start to gain power over it. You now know the rules your brain loves to follow, which is the very first step to knowing when and how you should break them to find some truly creative solutions.